Welcome to the dry fly fishing segment of our beginner tutorials. So what is dry fly fishing? Dry fly fishing is one of the most exciting styles of fly fishing because you actually see the trout come up out of its hiding place to eat your fly. It can be one of the most exciting things to see when fishing and typically gets newcomers coming back again and again. The reason it's called dry fly fishing is because your fly in essence stays dry as it floats on the surface. Flies in your Drifthook immerger and dropper rig set imitate the adult stage in a fly's life cycle. In this lesson, we'll go over the basics of dry fly fishing and how we can utilize the techniques to land monster trout. So when is the best time to do dry fly fishing? By reviewing the bonus charts in the download section of our members portal, you can learn the best months for using particular flies. But also keep in mind that just because these flies are active during a certain month, it doesn't necessarily mean that your flies will produce results every time. Nymph patterns are going to be more successful day in and day out. So basically the best time to dry fly fish is when you're going to see fish rising to the surface to eat, or if you see a big hatch coming off of the water. But before we dig deeper into the timing of dry fly fishing, let's discuss the fundamentals. Let's start with your rod setup. Successful dry fly fishing depends on what type of line you purchase with your rod. Check to make sure it's a floating line. Don't worry, most lines on the market are considered floating lines, and unless you specifically ask for a sinking line or a nymphing or stillwater fishing line, you most likely have the right line for the job. Next, you're going to want to use a 7 to 9 foot leader attached to the end of your fly line. I highly recommend 100% fluorocarbon leaders because it's virtually invisible to trout when it's on the water. But they are more expensive than traditional nylon leaders. So what I like to do is take a nylon leader and using a triple surgeon's knot, I add an additional 1 to 2 feet of fluorocarbon tippet. For review of the triple surgeon's knot, head back to lesson 6. When opening up a new leader, you're going to notice that it's coiled at one end to keep it from unraveling. Take that end of the leader and unwrap it around the loop before slowly letting the pile unravel. I made this mistake more than once trying to just unravel it and ending up with a large tangled mess in my feet. There are 2 ways of getting your leader as straight as possible. One is by using tension. If you grab the leader in sections, pull it tightly, and hold for a couple of seconds. The tension will help straighten out the leader. Do this all the way down until you get to the end. Another approach for straightening out the leader is using a small piece of rubber, like a rubber band or a piece of old bike tire. Take your piece of rubber and straighten out from the butt end all the way down to the tip of the leader. You can pick up small patches of rubber that are attached to your vest, like the one I used in this video. Next, you'll attach the fly to the end of your tippet or leader using the improved clinch knot or the non-slip loop knot. After you've tied on your fly, give it a little tug to make sure that it doesn't immediately break off. And also, don't forget to debarb it by taking your pliers and crimping down the barbs. This will make it easier to remove the fly after you've landed that trout. Today's modern dry fly uses natural and synthetic materials to help keep the fly on the water surface. Even though these materials have improved to keep the fly on top of the water, the fly can and will still sink or get submerged. In this case, I recommend using what they call floating or a dry powder in addition to your fly to keep it on top of the water as long as possible. I like to use a floating. I'll soak my entire fly with it, and then with my fingers, I'll run it down the leader about 2 to 3 feet. This will keep everything floating nice and high. So now that you have your rod set up and your fly attached, let's discuss what to look for when you're searching for rising fish. The best time to dry fly fish is when you see a hatch or flies on the water. A hatch is when a large number of flies go from a nymph stage to an adult stage and take flight. During this time, trout are coming to the surface to feed on those flies. When you see a trout coming to the surface, it can tell you a lot about what type of fly it is eating. If you see the fish coming to the surface but you don't see the opening of their mouths, possibly you see their backs, they're most likely chasing emergers. These are flies coming from the bottom to the surface to spread their wings. But if you see a trout rise with a ripple and bubbles, this typically means that the fish are taking flies off the surface. Smaller, less experienced trout might even jump out of the water to go after a big meal. The larger trout are a lot more stealthy. You might barely see the top of their head before they devour that meal and head back down. Look for dark heads or a little glimmer in the water, followed by large quantities of bubbles. These are going to be the larger trout that you're going to love to catch. Now that we know how to spot our feeding friends, let's discuss our cast and fly presentation. So just like in earlier lessons on casting, you're going to want to approach the fish from downriver. This is going to give you the best opportunity to present the fly without disturbing the fish. When you get into more advanced casting, you can work on casting across river and downriver, but starting out, I recommend a 3/4 upriver or directly upriver above the fish and letting the fly float down to the feeding zone. Before you place your fly down on the water, do a few false casts. A false cast is when you leave your line in the air casting forward and backward. Like the forward cast, where we pause at the back, we do the same as we're heading forward. Cast back, pause, cast forward, pause, and continue. As you do this, you can pull out more line and more line to adjust the distance. How do we want the fly to hit the water? Well, think of your fly as it's traveling through the air like a ball, flying towards its target and then coming to a gentle stop. Think of it as a feather dropping nice and lightly on top of the water. We're not trying to slap the water with our fly, but rather place it gently on the surface so it does not disturb the trout. So how do we do this? Soft landings are the best. The dry fly should land gently on the water surface just like a natural fly would. This will induce the fish to rise and take that fly. At the end of your forward cast, release the line as if you're aiming at the horizon rather than at the water. This way, your leader will straighten out before landing on the water, resulting in a soft landing for the fly and leader. Think about stopping your rod's forward movement at eye level and flattening out the rest of your cast to give it a little more delicate presentation. This will give you a nice loop presentation with a landing a little bit softer like a feather for that monster trout to devour. Where do you want to cast the fly? If you see a fish rising or feeding on the surface, you don't want to directly hit the spot where the fish was just at, because the current typically pushes the fish back slightly. He's actually now sitting in front of where the ripples once occurred. Cast a few feet in front of that last rise and let your fly float into its view. Mend your line and get ready for that fish to come to the surface. We'll go into more detail on what to do when the fish does actually go for your fly, but we'll do that in further lessons. For now, I just want you to practice searching for the rising trout, practicing your approach, your cast, and that feather soft landing. Sometimes a dry fly will start to sink, so what do? Take a few more fast casts to whip off any excess water and to dry out your dry fly. And if the extra casts don't dry out the fly, add a little more float into it, and that'll definitely help.